Okay, yeah. So like I said, I'm Adam. I'm the Inclusion Programs Library Officer here at the libraries. I just wanted to start with a bit of acknowledgement of country. We're on Wongal land here, and I pay acknowledgement to elders past and present in the area that we live and work on here, Canada Bay. We've got a wonderful talk for you today. We're very committed here at the libraries to sustainability. So these talks like these are really important. So I can hand it over to Stephen and Graham from Renew Energy.
Thank you, Adam. So today we're going to be talking about getting off gas and electrifying your home. It's become a bit of a hot topic. The 6 topic areas we'll be covering: the benefits of going electric and getting off gas, making a plan. It's not just a straightforward process, so it's worth thinking about how you're going to do things. And then looking at the 3 main uses of gas and how we can change them to an electrical solution. That's heating, hot water, and cooking, how you actually make it happen. So the benefits of going electric. So all electric homes are not a new idea. Before the 1950s, we had heating oil, kerosene, and coal gas, known as town gas. I know if you're of my era, you will remember the gasworks at Mortlake, which are no longer there and are now where Breakfast Point exists. But I guess that shows we've had energy transitions before. It's not new, and we're only just going through another one. But after the 50s, statewide electricity provisioning became quite widespread, and that led to the concept of all electric homes being promoted. So in the late 60s, oil was discovered in Bass Strait in large quantities. There was a byproduct of that was methane gas, and it was marketed as natural gas. And so a lot of homes were then connected to natural gas, which was sort of promoted as a clean product, and certainly a cheaper product at the time. So a lot of homes were turned into dual fuel households and gas appliances, primarily for cooking. In the southern parts of Australia, whole house ducted gas heating was introduced. So Victoria has a lot of underfloor gas heating. We're getting to the point now where all the oil is gone, the gas is drying up, and most new gas production is from coal seam or fracking, which is a more expensive and a more polluting process. And also, as you're probably aware, most gas produced in Australia is exported, so it's pegged to global prices. And so it's no longer a cheap alternative. I'll go into that in more detail. And it's not as clean as electricity is becoming. This graph shows the standard breakdown in a New South Wales home of the different energy uses. And you'll see that water heating is quite a high proportion. Space conditioning, if you're using gas heating, that would be a fair proportion of that. And then cooking is at 8%. So you can see if you do have gas in the home, there's quite a lot of capacity to convert that to electricity and to a greener outcome. Renew has done a fair bit of research in this area. We've done several reports to show the impacts of transferring to gas from electric, and we've been able to demonstrate that for most households over time, it's a cheaper option. And if done properly, you can actually get rid of your gas connection and only have one bill, which can lead to savings. But most of the savings come through having more efficient electric appliances. We did a later report in 2022, which did some comparisons of the costs and showed that generally dual fuel homes with electricity and gas weren't saving as much money as those who went all electric. But if you install solar as well, you'd make significant savings. You reduce your power bills by half. And there's added benefit if you also do energy efficiency measures such as adding insulation and draft proofing so that your heating systems are running more efficiently. You often hear people say, well, gas is cheaper than electricity. And if you analyse that, you'll see that gas per unit of energy is cheaper, but it's sold in megajoules. So approximately, these figures are a couple of years old. It's probably more expensive now, but gas is about 2 to 3 cents a megajoule. Electricity is 35 up to 40 cents. But once you convert megajoules to kilowatt hours, you'll see that the cost of gas on a comparative basis increases to around 10 cents or 9 to 10 cents. But if you look at the efficiency of electrical appliances, it totally changes the equations. A gas ducted heater, underfloor heating system, if it's running well, is about 80% efficient. The boiler itself is probably sitting at 80 to 85 efficiency. If you factor in ductwork that may be old and perhaps have splits or holes in it, the insulation's missing. If it's an old boiler, that efficiency may even be lower. Whereas a reverse cycle air conditioner, which uses the heat pump technology, can be 400 to 500% efficient. What that means is for every unit of electricity that goes in there, you're getting out 4 to 5 units of heat. Whereas with gas, for every unit of gas energy that you're putting into the system, you're only getting about 0.8, 0.7, 0.8. And it's the same for hot water heat pump, hot water systems. So this shows from that report we did estimate of annual energy bills with a basic gas house back in 2022. At that time, we did predictions up to 2024 with increases in power costs. Those costs have actually gone up more than what we predicted, so the savings would be more significant. But you can see that in 2024, a basic gas home would be paying about $3,500. If you converted that to electric, you might save about $700. But if you added in solar, which helps support your electrical appliances, you can easily halve that amount. It will vary for individual households and what the situation is, but there are potential for savings. The ongoing issue with gas being extracted from coal seams, fracking, local prices are pegged to international markets. One thing people are not necessarily aware of is gas appliances such as unflued gas heaters and gas cooktops emit carbon dioxide when burning gas and other pollutants like nitrous oxide. You might be familiar with having gas heaters in a room. You actually have to have a vented opening so that you don't get that buildup of carbon monoxide. Electrical appliances don't have that health impact. There is another issue with the aging gas pipe network. There's a thing called fugitive emissions. So there's leaks from those old pipes, and you may smell it sometimes when you're walking around the street. You might smell the smell of gas, and that's pure methane, which is going into the environment. Methane is the deadliest greenhouse gas, 45 times worse than CO2. So there's an ongoing issue there with the aging of that network and the fugitive emissions. At the same time, the electricity grid and electricity that's being supplied to you is getting greener all the time. Currently, it's at 35 to 40% renewable energy. In South Australia, they regularly get 95 to 100% green. The grid is totally green. And in New South Wales, there's a target of being 70% green or renewable by 2030 and 95% in 2035. So that's only going to get better. So the benefits of going to a green electricity is only going to improve with time. There's two graphs here that show the difference between emissions. That this first graph is in 2022 and shows the emissions from electricity at that point in time, mainly because most of it's coming from coal-fired power stations, and the emissions from the equivalent amount of gas. But if we jump to a prediction for 2030, when it's going to be 70% renewable energy, you can see the emissions for electricity have reduced significantly and will only keep reducing. Whereas gas will stay the same or actually may get worse because of the aging of the network. So the next things to think about is how to go about making the changes. The first thing that's really worth doing is analysing your power bill and your gas bill to try and understand your usage. You've got to be aware that if you get rid of your gas appliances, it will increase your electricity usage. But it's how you manage that so it doesn't really add significantly to your costs. It's worth looking for the best electricity plan. There's a federal government Energy Made Easy, I'll have a link for it later on, website where you can do comparison of energy plans. And there was a report the other week saying about 75% of people are paying more for their energy than they need to. They're not accessing the cheapest plans available. The other thing is to understand whether you're on a time of use tariff or a standard rate tariff. If your bill just shows one set rate or kilowatt hours, which might be 40 cents or 35 cents a kilowatt hour, it's much harder to get the advantage out of using your electrical appliances. The sample bill shown here is showing a time of use tariff. And it's also got a solar system connected. So you can see at the top there's 789 kilowatt hours of solar electricity that are fed into the grid. There's not much of a financial return from that at the moment. So the rationale in the long term is you try and use that solar to run your electrical appliances. The peak hours are usually, it varies depending on the retailer, but usually between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. of a weekday. And the shoulder period is between 7 or 8 in the morning and 2 p.m. The other peak is in the morning between 6 and 8. And then there's the off peak, which is overnight from 10 p.m. through to. So take advantage of that if you're on a time of use tariff, is to use your appliances in the shoulder period or in the off peak period. Do your dishwashing when you go to bed at night. Do your washing early in the morning. And I'll talk about other potential changes you can make. Yes, exactly. Another thing to consider to help you through the process is to consider getting a home energy assessment done. There's one called a residential scorecard, which has been a good system, but unfortunately I only found out the other day it's ending in June because the federal government has developed a new system, which is a NATAS, National Home Energy Rating Scheme, which has been there for 20 years for new homes. It's now going to apply to existing homes. And the proposal is in the long term, it will become mandatory, which will mean whenever you sell your home or you lease a property, you will have to do a mandatory disclosure of your energy efficiency. And to do that, you will need to get an assessment done. So the New South Wales has been doing a trial of this with quite a few homeowners. After June, that will become more available for people to use. And sometime in the future, a year or two, they may make it mandatory. But it's a very useful process. You get an expert, someone like me, who'll come in, walk through your home with you, look at all your appliances, look at your power bills, look at how your house is built, and you'll get a report, which is to guide as to how efficient your home could be, as well as recommendations of things you can do to improve that. For a lot of people, it's difficult. It's quite a change to take all the gas supply in your home. So you don't have to do it all at once. And you can do it as it becomes appropriate, as appliances age, or if you're renovating. That's an ideal time if you're planning a renovation to think about. If you're putting in a new kitchen, well, it makes sense to change your cooktop at that time because you're going to have an electrician on the site. And the same with the hot water. If you're doing a bathroom renovation, it could be time to upgrade the hot water system. But you do need to think about things like your electrical supply and your switchboard. It may be out of date because you're adding more electrical appliances. You may need extra power capacity. So it's worth getting an electrician to check your switchboard and your supply to make sure it's going to work with the appliances you put in. Some of the appliances may need additional space. You see the woman there with the heat pump, hot water. It's quite a big system. If you're replacing a small instantaneous gas hot water system that sits on a wall, you've got to make sure you've got space to put a system like this in. So just the sort of things you may need to consider. So looking at detail in the various types of appliances, heating. Are people familiar with the technology of heat pumps? For a long time, we've talked about reverse cycle air conditioning. Reverse cycles is a heat pump. And a heat pump actually just takes energy out of the air through a refrigeration process. It's the same principle as your fridge. The motor in your fridge is a heat pump. They're very efficient and they're getting more and more efficient. You will know that fridges in the last 20 years have become much more efficient than they were. And as I said before, for every kilowatt of heat, direct electrical energy that goes in there, you'll get 5 kilowatts of heat out. So they're very efficient. You might already have a air conditioner that you use for cooling, but you don't necessarily use it for heating. You might have gas heating, which you may prefer. But the actual heat pump's more efficient at heating than cooling. And so you can just switch on your existing air conditioning without any gas heating. So it is more efficient to go for smaller split systems. The challenge with that is that if you want it in every room, you're going to have a lot of small systems. So it can be good to get a balance. And this is where looking at your home in terms of its overall energy efficiency can be important. If your home is well insulated and certain rooms that you tend to live in, maybe they're the rooms you air condition and other rooms you don't use as much. You may not fit with an air conditioner, but you might use other means of heating or cooling. Look for a refrigerant with low global warming potential. So this reduces the risk of ozone depletion. The best refrigerants ideally are things like pentane or CO2, but they're quite hard to find. But it's worth asking the question whether the refrigerant in the system has a low global warming potential. Should be around a value of 1. And low noise is also important for the condenser outside. If it's put next to a bedroom or a neighbour's window, you may have problems. As I mentioned, you can use your existing air conditioning for heating instead of gas heating. It will make sense if it's not that old. If it's an old system, it's worth considering upgrading it because, like fridges, air conditioning systems over the last 10 or 15 years have become significantly much more efficient. I put in here hydronic heating. Not many people would use that, but some people prefer hydronic heating because it's radiant heating. So you're not having air blowing over you. You just feel the warmth through either radiators, or you can have it in the floor. It's quite expensive to install. I don't think it's really necessary for a Sydney climate. If your house is well insulated, it's slow to react to get the benefit out of it, to actually heat the room up or heat the spaces up. And there has been quite a few instances where people have put them in new homes, and the new homes are much better insulated, that they're actually overheating the homes because they turn them on early in the morning, but it takes a couple of hours for them to warm up, and the house is getting sun on a winter's day, and it's then they've got to open the windows. So I've just put it in there for reference because traditionally that has been fired by gas, but you can now get electric heat pumps to run these systems. But for a house, you're looking at about $25,000 to put a system in. So, and it can be expensive to retrofit because you've got to get all the piping and so forth through the home. Air conditioning is a much more affordable option. If we now look at hot water, again, it's the same technology. The most common system used is a heat pump. So you have a standard hot water tank and you have a condenser, which can either be fitted on the top or separate. But it's the same principle. It has a refrigeration cycle and it takes energy out of the air. And they're very efficient. So as I said, you can get ones with the compressor on the top or a separate compressor. The ones with the separate compressor tend to be more energy efficient, but you may need more space, so be aware of that. Size the tank right to your household. You don't need to make it too big. They do recover quite quickly. And look at things like with the air conditioning, noise can be a problem. If the compressor's outside next to a bedroom window, whatever. Look at the warranties. You should get a warranty of 5 to 6 years on the compressor. If it's less than that, the quality is probably not as good. And ideally, look for a stainless steel tank. You'll get a warranty of 15 years with a stainless steel tank. You pay a bit more, but the enameled steel tanks have a bad history of rusting out because they have what's called a sacrificial anode attached to the tank, and that attracts corrosion. And if that's not replaced every 3 or 4 years, the tanks can quickly rust out, and people easily forget to replace those anodes. So you have a lot more peace of mind putting in a stainless steel tank. And again, CO2, the best ones use CO2 as the refrigerant gas because there's lower global warming potential. And look for what's called a high COP, coefficient of performance. And that should be in the range of 4.5 to 5 is the ideal setting. And that goes back to that ratio of energy input to heat output. Another option, if you don't have space at the side of your home for a tank and a compressor, solar hot water is still a good standby. We've had it in Australia for a long time and we've led the field with the quality of the installations. It's a bit more expensive, but it can work really well in certain instances. If you're a small household with not much hot water use, they can be all you need. And the challenge with them is during winter, when we have a lot of overcast days, the sun is not heating the water and you have to use an element. And that element is usually a direct resistive electrical element like 3 kilowatts. And that starts to get expensive. So if you have a large family with lots of teenage kids that are having showers, long showers in the middle of winter, a heat pump's probably going to be a much more efficient system than a solar hot water system. Can be useful in inner urban sites in that it can be placed on the roof and you save the space. You want to check your roof is structurally strong enough. If it's an old tile roof and the timber's a bit worn, it's a fair bit of weight, especially the type that have the tank on the top there. It is quite a bit of weight. So you may need an engineer to verify that the roof can take the load. You may already have an electric storage water heater. These are fairly inefficient because, again, they have those direct electric resistive elements in them, 2 to 3 kilowatts. But now you can make them run more efficiently if you have solar. You can fit them with a timer, and so that the element only comes on when your solar is producing power. The thing that's happening now is that the price, if you're on the time of use tariff that I talked about earlier, the cost of electricity in the middle of the day is getting much cheaper. So again, even if you don't have solar, you can get a control system or a timer, get the electrician to fit a timer, and you can run it during the day when that electricity is much cheaper. It saves you having to replace the tank, especially if it's not old. But keep in mind, these tanks, if it's a enamel steel tank, probably only have a life of 10 years and then they'll rust out, as I said earlier. So if you're getting close to 10 years old, you might consider upgrading to a heat pump rather than putting in a control system. Cooking. So who likes to cook with gas? A lot of people like to cook with gas because it's very reactive, especially if you're cooking with woks and so forth. But as I said, there's a lot of pollution that comes from cooking with gas, a lot of particulates, not just the CO2 and nitrous oxide, there's other particulates that are released. And there's a lot of studies done to show that it actually affects people with respiratory disorders, such as people with asthma. So it's worth considering changing to electric for that reason. Are you familiar with induction cooktops? Does anyone have an induction cooktop? Okay. And how do you find that?
You'd actually replace the gas one.
Yeah.
It won't reduce it as well.
Yeah.
Just something that says there's something that the old cost.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may have to replace your cookware. But the impact can be significant. They're very easy to clean. They're safe to use. You can't burn yourself with them. And they're very quick. We boil water on it as quickly as we do with a kettle. So it's worth considering. One thing to keep in mind is to check the power requirements. Some of them have a big power draw, and some may even require you to upgrade to a 3-phase power. So when you're looking at cooktops, ask what the power rating is and check with your electrician that your house will cope with that power, or if it doesn't, what needs to be done to upgrade to suit. Okay. The next step is, how do I make it happen? Now, I sent a copy of these slides to the council, and because I've got towards the end especially, there's a lot of links in here, and it'll be sent out to you all as a PDF, and you can access all of that information. You may not be aware, but the New South Wales government has quite a lot of incentives for people to put more efficient appliances and save energy. So you can actually get rebates to upgrade your air conditioners to put in newer ones. So if you've got one that's 10 or 15 years old, it's certainly worth considering upgrading it. It is through a list of approved suppliers, so you are limited in who you can go with. The same applies to hot water systems. There's a reasonable rebate to go through that. But again, it's a list of approved suppliers and systems. Unfortunately, some of the best systems aren't included. They've put sort of mid-range systems, I guess, to keep it more affordable. But it limits you into the type of systems. But if you keep in mind the things I've noted before about when selecting a hot water system, when you go to those suppliers, ask those same questions, and I'm sure they can probably find a product that's going to give you a close match to that. You can also get a lighting upgrade for upgrading your lights. If you've got a lot of old halogen lights, you can change them to LEDs and get assistance with that. They're currently doing a review of this scheme and looking at upgrading it with a whole lot of other things such as batteries and even things like EV charging and how EV batteries can connect to the grid. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this space. So as I mentioned before, you don't have to do it all at once. You know, replace appliances as they wear out or as it suits your budget. But it's worth doing your research and knowing what you want before the appliance needs replacing. Because what often happens when a hot water system rusts out, you ring your plumber and they'll come and they'll just want to do the simplest thing they can, and they'll replace the existing one you have with something similar. But if you know you want to get a heat pump or a solar hot water heater and you know you've done some of the research, you can sort of circumnavigate that. And that's what's said in the next line about challenging tradies. A lot of them, being plumbers, are geared to gas because there's a fair bit of expensive work in doing gas fitting. And they like to just do what they've always done. But, you know, feel if you've done your research and you've got information in front of you, it can help you negotiate with them. There are some companies that specialize in helping you through this process. We are not in a position to recommend companies. We try and make sure our advice is independent, but you can search for those. And as I mentioned earlier, you may need a new energy plan. If you're getting rid of your gas plan, you might have your gas and power plan through the one provider. If you're getting rid of one, it's an ideal time to shop around, see if you can get a better deal. And there's that federal government site, the Energy Made Easy site. So it's not like the compare the market meerkat type of comparison site, which are, you know, funded by, you know, what do you call it? You know, funded by the companies that get the reports on there. This is totally independent. And one good point with it is that you can actually feed in what's called your national meter identifier. So if you look on your power bill, there's a number, an MMI, and that identifies your electricity meter. If you put that into this website, you've got to give it permission to do that. It'll get your energy data from your meter and it'll show you plans that match your energy use. So it's quite smart. And you'll get a whole range of different plans, which will have different feed-in tariffs for solar, different daily rates, different time of use tariffs. It's also an opportune time to convert to a time of use tariff if you're on a fixed rate tariff. And I think you'll find you will be better off. Now, the next thing is ideally, if you've got rid of all the gas appliances, you can now get rid of your gas account. And so you're not paying that daily charge, which is normally the biggest component of a gas account. So you can close, it's fairly straightforward to close your account with your gas retailer, but getting disconnected from the network is a harder thing to achieve. Unfortunately, the gas network's in the start of the death spiral. It's happening significantly in Victoria. There's certain areas of Victoria, recently regional areas, where they're announced they're not providing gas anymore because so many people have come off it that it's not profitable because the cost on the remaining consumers increases significantly. So they don't want to lose people, but so you may need to be a bit aggressive if they're not wanting to talk to you. But it should be straightforward. You can just get your meter to be plugged. It should cost around $100. They may push you to do what's called extinguishment, and that's where they actually take the meter away. That will cost you possibly $1,500. You don't need to do that. Some people are doing that because they want to get rid of the system and not be tempted to reconnect, but there's options there to consider. As I mentioned, it's always, even if you still keep your gas heating, it's really beneficial to look at the thermal comfort and the thermal efficiency of your home and making sure it's well insulated, that you seal and draft proof under doors, especially if it's an older home. I assume that in this area, a lot of the homes are, early last century. And so there'll be gaps under doors and windows are rattly and even you'll see at the bottom there the vents on walls. These were originally put in those period homes because of the gas and the coke fires, so to ensure there was some ventilation. So if you get rid of your gas, you don't need them anymore, and you can quite easily seal them off. If it's a double brick cavity wall, I would recommend only sealing the interior because that allows the outer vent to allow the outer skin of brickwork, which gets wet, to breathe and the cavity to breathe. But you shouldn't have any problems sealing off, and you'll find that will reduce a lot of your drafts. And quite simple to do,
Inside the 1 year with that. Can get in the bottom way.
Yes.
See what we want to do.
Yeah, you can. I mean, some people who are renting just put a bit of polystyrene over it. I've mixed up a bit of, mortar and just plastered it. It's not hard to do.
That's what advantage to seeing it.
Yes. In your bathrooms, primarily, you might have a ceiling fan in the ceiling, which normally traditionally just went into the ceiling space. You can fit them with a damper that will close when they're not operating. It has 2 fins on it. So when you switch on the fan, it'll open. But when it's not working, they drop close, and that stops warm air going out and losing your warm air. The other thing to think about with ceiling fans, more from a health perspective, is often if it's just going into your ceiling space and you've got insulation in that ceiling space, all that damp air from your bathroom and even from your kitchen is going into the ceiling space and settling on your insulation, which is the ideal equation to have mold growing. If you're going to put a damper in and your ceiling exhaust only empties into the ceiling space, it's better to get the tradesperson who does it to extend that duct out through the roof to outside air so that all that dampness goes way out and doesn't go into your roof. You may find you get mold on the ceiling of your bathrooms and so forth. And that's usually the prime cause of it. So as mentioned in our research reports, if you add solar, there's a huge benefit if you're going to all electric, because you can use that solar energy to run your electrical appliances. When solar panels first went in, the government was paying, the retailers were paying large, what are called feed-in tariffs. So for every kilowatt of energy you were exporting into the grid, at first they were paying 60 cents a kilowatt hour. Now it's down to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So the benefit, in doing that is minimal. Whereas if you can use that solar to run your hot water heater, run your dishwasher, charge your EV, you're going to get the most benefit out of it, because you're not importing energy from the grid. And it will pay for itself. So that graph just shows the comparison of going on the left from an all gas, a dual fuel home, to all electric with your ducted AC, a fully ducted system. If it's a split system, all electric, there's further savings. The next one is if it's an all gas with solar, and the last one, if it's all electric with solar, and you can see it's almost a third of the dual fuel home. So the other thing that's changing a lot, is electrification of the transport and electrical vehicles. You may not be thinking about it now, but in another 5 years, you might be considering getting a new car. I think you'll find then the range of electrical vehicles in Australia is amazing already. There's probably too many. There's something like 54 different models available. I think some of them will fall out of the market in the next few years, but the quality and the options are significant. If you can use your solar panels to charge them, they're going to be very cheap to run. They're even cheap to run if you've got to go to a public charger, or even download, import electricity from the grid. It's cheaper if you charge them at night on an off-peak rate, or during that midday peak when all the solar is pumping cheaper electricity into the grid. One thing that's changing is you can use the car battery to run the home. You will have probably heard that the federal government has a battery incentive at the moment, giving you money to put in a battery to complement your solar system. Those batteries, they're putting in bigger ones now, but the standard ones are 10 to 20 kilowatt hours. Most cars have probably 50 to 70 kilowatt hour batteries, and most people's cars are sitting there 80% of the time. So there's a thing now called vehicle to grid, V2G. And what that is meaning is that you can have a charger in your home, which you can use your solar or your grid connection to charge your phone when the rates are cheap, charge your car when the rates are cheap. And then when the electricity rates are expensive at peak time, you can take that battery and run your home, or export that energy back to the grid and get paid for it. It's fairly new in the market. It's not widely available. There's trials. The federal government released a standard for it at the end of 2024. People like AGL and Origin are running trials of it at the moment. Some cars in the market have it available, but I think in another 12 to 18 months, you'll find most EV models will have this vehicle to grid. Some of them already have what's called vehicle to load, where you can plug in a camping fridge or a computer or a particular load into your car. But the vehicle to grid, it's still in its infancy, but it'll change very quickly. I'll quickly go through a renovation. This is my own home. We renovated back in 2019. The main reason was it's a single-story terrace that has an attic with a two bedrooms in it. The rear bedroom was a 1970s fibro-clad, uninsulated room with a big window facing west. And it was just totally uncomfortable. So we got rid of that and built a new bedroom, which you can see a photo of there, with a good north-facing window. The house, because it's a terrace with large terraces either side, doesn't have any north-facing windows, so we don't get any winter sun. So that enabled us to get some in. Elsewhere in the home, we replaced old windows with new timber windows with better glass. We're under the flight path, so it was acoustic glass, but also what's called low E glass, low emitting glass, which is quite energy efficient. Not as energy efficient as, say, double glazing, but it was a better acoustic solution than standard double glazing. And we did a lot of sealing around doors. So you can see, and we've added new blinds and shutters. You can see the window up on the top right-hand corner. That blind on there is what's called a honeycomb blind. It pulled down, but then it opens up and it's got a hexagon shape. So there's air pockets in there. They're readily available. The other roller blinds, you can see in the photo, I put a rail on the side so that there's an air pocket trapped between the blind and the window. The shutters are close fitting. And you can see we put in only a small solar panel system on the rear roof. Part of the challenge was we're overshadowed. We've got 2 3-story terraces either side. So I couldn't put it on the main roof. And even where it is overshadowed. So the solar benefit we get in winter is limited. Most houses now, if you have space, are putting on 6 to 8 kilowatt size systems. So it was a relatively small system. We had an existing electric storage heater, which wasn't that old. So because we had an electrician there, we got him to put a timer on that. So it comes on when the solar's generating. We got rid of an unsafe gas heater. We tried to get it serviced and they said, no, it's too unsafe. So we got rid of that, replaced it with 2 split system heat pumps. We put good quality ceiling fans in most of the bedrooms and living room and kitchen. And we replaced the gas cooktop, which had broken burners on it, and we couldn't get replacements anyway. So it was time. And so it's that thing of doing it when it's time to do it. Obviously, if you can get rid of an inefficient appliance, the sooner the better, but sometimes your budget doesn't suit. And we put in new sealed exhaust fans in the bathrooms, and we put in much more efficient lights throughout. So the consequence of that is, you can see a summary there of what the power bills were like. Once the gas heater failed, we bought a portable electric heater, which was quite expensive to run. So we used that for 1 season before we could start the renovation. And then after the renovation, we were able to get rid of our gas bill. And we're getting solar export. We're only using 4 to 5 kilowatt hours a day in summer because solar is helping to reduce that usage, but we're getting 8 to 9 kilowatts exported. In winter, because of the shading of the solar and our heating, we're in an old brick terrace. It stays pretty cool in summer. So our heating demand is the one thing where we use a lot of energy, which doesn't balance out with the solar intake. But anyway, we've reduced our expenditure by about 33%, even though we've got more electrical equipment. It's efficient equipment. But the main benefit is we're much more comfortable and healthier. The kitchen's so much easier to clean, even the range hood, and much happier. And even though we're not getting the maximum benefit out of that solar system we should have, it's paid for itself sometime last year. So now, the benefit, it'll only increase. useful resources. I won't go into those in detail. You'll get the PDF copy so you can access them. The New South Wales websites. One I will highlight is Renew has its Getting Off Gas Toolkit we have developed, which is a website which can lead you through this whole process. So I think you'll find that a really useful resource. There's some links at the bottom there. One is to a really good webinar, and the bottom one is Electrify This. It's a woman, Sarah Aubrey, who has an Instagram page called Electrify This. She, with the help of one of our members, went off gas and electrified her home. She had a really inefficient gas heating system. She did the residential energy scorecard and went from a 2-star rating to a 10-star rating. So you can go to that link and see her story. Just a bit more about Renew. We're a not-for-profit membership-based organisation, and our aim is to provide independent advice to the public about renewable energy, energy efficiency and sustainable living. Our big flagship event is Sustainable House Day, which is on the 17th of May. That's when houses across the country are open to the public. So you can go and visit, and the focus this year will be on retrofits. So it will be on people who have done a similar thing to what I've gone through. And so you can talk to them about what the challenges were, what worked, what didn't work, and you can learn a lot from that process. And the council has another event, which will be at Concord Library, and it's the next stage in terms of looking at detail on installing solar and home batteries. We can take any questions.
Those hot water heat pumps, do they make as much noise as an air conditioner? Reverse cycle air conditioner?
Yeah, I'll just repeat the question for those online. The question was, does the hot water heat pumps have the same noise output as air conditioners? It's similar. Good quality ones, you should be able to get a dBA rating of 40. So it's a matter of doing the comparisons, but it's similar technology, so the output is similar.
Give us a little more detail on the glass that you used in your renovation. You said you didn't double the layers.
No.
You used a particular.
Yeah, it's a laminated glass, and it was the best solution acoustically. People, because they're on the flight path, I had to get an acoustic engineer to give us a report, and we had certain standards we had to meet with the glazing or the windows. People often think double glazing is effective for acoustic. It does, but it's not as effective as laminate glass. So this is a laminate that has an interlayer, which was an acoustic interlayer, but it's also a low E, which means low emissivity. And what that relates to is the amount of energy, the energy that goes through the glass is either reflected, absorbed, some of it's absorbed, and or goes through and is refracted. Of the proportion that's absorbed, some is re-emitted. It's often used a lot now in new houses, which really reduces the amount of energy that gets into the house, but it can reduce your light levels.
Sorry, it does reduce. It does or doesn't?
If it's tinted, it reduces your light levels. So it's best to aim for, if you're going to use a low E glass, look for a clear low E glass, because the other benefit is it still lets the winter sun in. You know, if you've got a house where heating is your main problem, you don't want to block out your winter sun.
Do you have any experience of changing gas hot water in unit pumps to heat pumps?
Yeah, the question was, do we have any experience with changing gas hot water systems in units to heat pumps? That is a challenging area. There are some examples where it has been done, but it hasn't been widespread done. Part of the challenge is it depends where the systems are. Often the gas systems are what's called manifolded. Is there a whole series of systems in the one place, or are they individuals on each unit?
These are the in the garage.
Okay, so it's a gas storage system. Yeah,
Is it a common hot? Is it a common hot water?
It's common.
Yeah,
It's common.
it's a common hot water
We
system.
did do, there was a building in St Leonard's that changed all their tanks because they became old and needed to be changed. And they went over to a solar hot water system.
Solar.
Yeah, they put in a solar system.
Yeah,
It was all, yeah, so they maximised the use of that room.
the thing with heat pump is the condenser needs to be outside, or have the condenser, because it has to have access, or in an area where it's got direct access to the air, because that's where it gets its energy from. And it needs to either take heat out of the air or dissipate heat to the air. So that's the challenge. If all the tanks are inside, it's
Thanks for the inside.
but there's a distance limit. You know, the more than 5 meters. If the refrigerant piping is running longer than 5 meters, say, your efficiency will drop. So as Stephen said, in that instance, if it's not too far to the roof, you could put in solar hot water. The other option could be converting them to electric storage and putting solar PV panels on the roof to power the electric storage.
And that system was probably about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But we also put in a gas boost system. So in other words, you had a gas boiler which would boost up if the water wasn't hot enough.
If you did that today, you'd use an electric boost. Okay, well, I think I'll bring it to a close. Thank you, everyone online, and we'll close it now.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.